in that
Right.
area.
Yes.
And there was some concern because there was going to be building of homes.
Yes.
And what happened ultimately, the city council went ahead and said it was okay regardless
That's right.
of FAA's recommendations or suggestions, considerations, however you want to put it.
Yeah.
And I thought that was interesting. I thought that was interesting because ultimately, it's somewhat similar why we're here today.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
so I was looking at some of the other cities, one in particular in the city of Los Angeles near LAX, and that's In and Out. And that's pretty scary alone, In and Out there. I mean, you could literally see under the planes as they fly over. I've been there plenty of times, and however, I'm sure there was a recommendation from FAA as well, and I think ultimately there was also a council consideration of sorts or an approval made, because that's been there for a few years, more than 5 maybe.
Councilmember English, you bring up important history, and I believe you are correct. And I just brought up on your PowerPoint screens here, if you look beyond this trapezoidal area, you see to the far, I guess it would be the east, you see that residential development called Lee Homes.
Mm-hmm.
That was the project. You see the residences end right at the RPZ, but then there's that Target building. And there's that part, that edge of the Target building that actually projects into the RPZ. So when the EIR was done for that project, it flagged this as a problem. And because it was a specific plan, under state law, you were required to submit this project to the Los Angeles County Airport Land Use Commission. And you did. And that Land Use Commission recommended against approval of this project. And it came back to the City Council, and in order for the City Council to approve the specific plan, allowing that corner of the Target building to be in the RPZ, the council had to take a vote to override the LA County Airport Commission, and it did. It made specific findings to, notwithstanding that commission's recommendation, to approve the specific plan, including the target that would encroach into the RPZ.
And that's interesting you say that because, I remember the first appeal. There was some council members that were here speaking against this project, but they were the same ones that voted for it back when. And I think it's just very interesting how that came about. And if I remember correctly, it was a 5-0 vote with regards to
You probably have a better memory on that than I do.
Lee Homes.
Yeah.
And then I was there at Target's opening.
Mm-hmm.
All the other openings that have happened in that area.
One thing that makes this different slightly or somewhat from the Target project is that if you notice this RPZ configuration, yes, there are some other buildings that encroach into it. Obviously, the Target portion, a little bit of Lowe's, a tiny bit. And then there's this AT&T building on the north. I'm informed that that was approved and constructed a long time ago before the RPZ was even configured in the way it was. If the AT&T project was coming before you now, we'd be in the same kind of situation. But one of the distinguishing facts here is if you look at where in the RPZ this restaurant is proposed to be located, you see that center line, there's a slight line that kind of runs right down the middle. This is right in the middle of the flight path. So that's another distinguishing factor between some of the other projects that you might have approved, is where this one's located. So that's part of your history. But if you look at how Lot 2, and that's that center lot on which the PetSmart and the Ross is located, owned by Prime Store, look how that was originally configured. It showed the development pushed outside of the RPZ, nothing but parking lot in the RPZ. That was the best planning approach and advice that you received through your consultants and your EIR back in 2001 when that project was approved. And that is, another, I think, factor to take into account in interpreting the abrogation easement. Why was that abrogation easement worded as it is to restrict development as it has? So anyway, we recommend that, notwithstanding the fact that in 1990, when Burger King was approved on Jim Gochian's project, and that we can't find records that in 62 or 79, other standalone buildings in other parts of the city weren't approved through a lot split, even though there is one in 89, that you rigorously apply your authority under the MAP Act to require a lot split, thereby making sure all these issues get addressed through the environmental process and through the Planning Commission process. I think it's important that these issues be considered for the benefit of your community, your airport, and the people that might be occupying that structure in the future.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I move to uphold the building director's decision denying the grading and building permits.
I have a
Oh,
comment.
did you have a question? I'm sorry.
Yeah, yeah.
And Mayor Brown,
I'm sorry.
I'm so sorry, we have other
To the
council
chair, I
members.
wasn't finished either. My
Mayor-
goodness.
Mayor
All
Brown,
right.
if I may, good
Yes.
evening. Again, John Cotty. It's
Go
a
ahead,
pleasure
sir.
to be back. I would note that this is a continued public hearing, and therefore we should allow members of the public, to the
Yes,
extent
we
they
have
want
to.
to comment.
Thank you.
That's
Go-
fine.
Should I wait before I make my comment?
No, go ahead, sir.
Okay, no, I really appreciate the Prime Stars here, and trying to come up with development. It's not, I don't want to say that this is a good group of developers who have good projects throughout the community, one being in Southgate. I did disclose that I had met with the owner, and we had talked to, hey, like 3 or 4 years ago, I don't remember how much it was, and I was, hey, could we do something with a restaurant there, etc. But, obviously the city attorney, and we have these issues that have come up that have made us think, and we're here at this point. So, the LAX In-N-Out example was given as an example where there's a restaurant within an RPZ zone. And we look at that example, and you can see that it's clearly within the RPZ zone. Okay, but I really don't think anybody can claim that there hasn't been a problem there. Because in the early 1990s, I was eating there, with my best friend who was going to get married, and an airplane crashed on the runway, close to the edge of the runway, and ended up tumbling towards one of the terminals and bumping into it and running into some cars. A few people got killed. So accidents do happen is what I'm trying to get at. So this isn't the best example of something that say, hey, a building was built in the RPZ zone and accidents do not happen. I was witness to one. I was there. You guys probably remember the one in the early 1990s that happened there. But my question is to Mr. McLean. Can you come up here real quick? Can you map out? I just want to see if there's different paths, for this group to do what they are intending to do, because I think there's some resistance as to going through the split. Okay, what would be the process if they had to go through the split, and if they followed that process, what would that be, sir?
That would be before the Planning Commission.
Okay,
for
but what are the
approval.
different steps? Is it just a single step?
Yeah,
Okay.
it's a hearing before the Planning Commission.
So to the attorney over here for the other group, what's preventing you from going through that step? Well, I mean,
The law, the
it's a
application of
valid
the
question.
exemption, it's that simple.
oh, go ahead, sir.
It's very simple, it's the law. That's why we have the legislature that adopted the exemption under the MAP Act, and that is the controlling issue before us today. The issue of the RPZ, the issue of the location of the restaurant relative to the RPZ, the issue of the FAA, those are not before you today. What is before you and what was the basis of the denial of the permit was that we needed a lot split. And so the application of the rule is whether or not the planning department and the building department have the ability to review the project pursuant to that exemption. And our position, as I indicated previously, that's supported by the legislative history of that exemption and the documentation that we presented as to every single category. The issue of parking, the issue of landscaping, the location of the building, the setback of the building, the height of the building. All of those issues are properly controlled, overseen, and administered by the departments. That is the issue before you today. I don't see the FAA here. We still have a letter from the FAA that indicates and affirms that our building does not cause any impacts to the airport. That's exactly what we needed. That issue keeps coming up. I hear attorneys talk to you about where it should be located as if they're experts in the field. The expert in the field, under the law, is the FAA, and we got that letter. But let me remind you, that issue is not before you today. You cannot deny our request to overturn the denial of our building permits on an FAA issue. You have to make the determination that as we presented the law with regards to the exemption, it does not apply. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, can I make a comment?
Yes.
My name is Arturo Snyder. I'm the CEO of Prime Store. I do want to comment quickly because Mr. Ennis brought up the question that the building that was built outside of the aviation easement originally, and you can clearly see that it was placed outside. We were the developers of that building from inception. The reason that it is placed where it is because the aviation easement actually is an easement, if you can visualize it, that establishes height limits. And as planes approach, you have to stay above a certain height. The building that we built, if you recall, it's a pretty high building, like the Target building is, wouldn't be able to be built inside that line because it's a much taller building. And we knew that from the beginning when we acquired this property. In our entire history, this is unprecedented, so we were absolutely confident that we could put a pad here. We designed it from day one at the height and in compliance with that aviation easement, because we had it because it was recorded on our property, in order to comply with that easement. That easement is there and we're in compliance with. That's why that building is the way it is. So just wanted to clarify that. Thank you.
There was some mention, it was mentioned that there was no letter from the FAA with respect to, other than the January 2014 letter. We have a letter here dated April 28th, 2015. Has everyone seen that from the FAA?
Oh, sure, we certainly have seen that, and that actually affirms our position. What it says is that what we know, which is what I mentioned, they don't have the ability to approve a local project. They don't have jurisdiction to do that. The city gets to do that. Moreover, they've also indicated that the certification and clearance they gave us is not revoked. It's still in effect. Why? Because they're sticking to their ability to opine professionally on the safety of this building, and they have done that, and that position still stands. They never told in that letter, they've never said that we're in violation of the MAP Act. They never said that the building can proceed. They never said the building can't be built. What they said is that their letter does not constitute approval. Now they're taking, the city attorney's taking that letter to mean that we're somehow in violation of the aviation easement. The aviation easement calls for approval, as was mentioned, those three options, right? The airport, city, or the FAA. The FAA approval, the only approval they can issue is the letter we received in January, and we still have that letter.
I'd like to call your attention to page 1 of the April 28th, 2015 letter, in which it says that, however, the airspace analysis will advise that structures which will result in the congregation of people within an RPZ are ill-advised in the interest of protecting people and property on the ground. And further, in the long-term interest of safety, such structures should be disallowed. It further goes on to say, keep in mind that an FAA determination that the project is not objectionable from an airspace perspective does not mean that the FAA has approved the project itself or provided a decision allowing the project to go forward in the RPZ.
That's correct.
And so it's basically saying it has not approved your project.
It has not approved the project. It has made the determination that the project, based on the rules, does not impact the airport. That's the only thing they can do. Only you can approve a project. Only Planning Commission can approve a project. Only the City Council can approve a project. If you have a project by right, meaning that, as the Planning Director indicated, it's consistent with the underlying zoning, the only thing that you would need as a property owner is to get the building and grading approvals that you need. That's written in the state constitution, ma'am.
But you would agree with me, wouldn't you, that if the FAA is specifically saying that it has not granted approval for this project, that if there were an accident and there were people hurt or killed, the city would be liable and the FAA would not defend the city? Would you agree with that?
I can't extrapolate on a catastrophic scenario from that standpoint. There's a lot of issues that relate to that. What I'm pointing to is the path that's been already designed for the development of these projects. Yes, many different scenarios can happen. Doesn't have to be the airport. It can be something other more serious incidents, certainly emergencies and the like. What I'm telling you today is that based on the process that's been designed by the city, we are in compliant with that process. And I have to emphasize, the issue of the RPZ is not before you today. The city attorney, one of the few things we're in agreement on is that that's exactly not before you today. What's before you today is whether or not a lot split is required.
I must say I'm all for development. However, in this particular issue, the in and out was a bad example. My personal opinion. Farmers Boys is directly, Farmers Boys is directly in the middle of the landing zone. The In-N-Out Burger, I've been there 1,000 times. I have. And what you're not showing under that box, there's a line, that blue line goes under. The In-N-Out is north of that street that curves, where people pull in to get in line for In-N-Out. That wasn't drawn through, it was stopped between the white box. I'm everyone knows I'm very familiar with Westchester. So that line there, if you'd have drew it through, the In-N-Out is north of that box. And there's a street that comes in between where that line cutoff is on that particular square there. So the In-N-Out is on the northern portion, and if you draw a direct line from the runway 4, that's what we're talking about, correct? It's north of runway 4, not directly in the middle of runway 4.
My point simply with that example was that the FAA issued a letter of determination, and I wanted to draw examples outside of the city that actually support the issue with regards to the FAA's authority.
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Yes, my point simply was there that the FAA is the one that issued the authorization with regards to that development, exactly how we received it here. And that example is just one of many examples. There's other FAA letters that were issued, as was mentioned, as part of some of the development that's happening, that's happened within the RPZ.
Do you know of another restaurant in California that there was an airport built, a restaurant built right in the middle of the RPZ zone? Because you showed the In-N-Out, that's fair, it's LAX, which is far north of the RPZ zone, and the other half of it is not in the RPZ zone.
Yes, and I can't tell you because I haven't researched it. And frankly, I haven't researched it because it's not before you today. So I'm happy to answer any questions you might have about the MAP Act and stay focused on that. Frankly, I think that that's really the critical piece that we have before you today, and that's the basis of our request. It's a simple property right issue. You have examples in other regional center, shopping centers, where you have applied what we believe is the correct standard as affirmed by the law and also affirmed by your planning director. And we'd like to have that same application of rule with regards to our development.
To the chair.
Yes.
So there's made mention of, liability. So hypothetically speaking, say that it's built and something happens and there's an accident. Would you know, or would you be aware of the city ultimately being the blame, being the approval factor here, right? Because whether we approve it, whether you build it yourself without our approval, regardless, who would ultimately be the responsible party?
Well, obviously, we would be building it only consistent with what the law provides, and from that standpoint. In terms of the vicissitudes of scenarios with regards to the functionality of the airplane, with regards to the conditions of a hypothetical that you're suggesting, I really can't opine. I really can't tell you. But what I will tell you is that with any project that you approve, you do it and you apply with what the system and the laws are in place at the time that you review the projects. Many of the projects that are built in the city are not subject to planning commission approval. They're frankly not before you today. You couldn't function as a city if that were the case. So what I can tell you is that I can't predict every scenario. What I can tell you is that with regards to what we're proposing, we are proposing to proceed with the development of that project consistent with every applicable rule that applies to the project.
To the chair once again. So to our sitting city attorney, I asked the question to you. Would there be some liability that the city would be placed under? Because ultimately, if I'm familiar with lawsuits in general, there's naming of sorts of individuals and people, et cetera, in this case municipality. Where would we stand with regards to being named in a potential lawsuit?
Councilwoman English, it's, as we discussed last time, it is difficult to opine as to the ultimate question of liability in this case, but I will say this. Number one, the Government Claims Act governs liability for the municipal corporation. In this particular case, you're not dealing with public property. The property isn't owned by the city. It's owned by Prime Store, and therefore an essential element of a dangerous condition of public property is missing. We don't own the property. Secondly, I would add that we would be provided an immunity pursuant to Government Code Section 818.4, which provides for immunity for the issuance of permits. Now, again, anybody can find their way to the courthouse and name the city and name anybody in the lawsuit. And again, as Mr. Fraggio mentioned, it's difficult to discuss all the eventualities that might occur. But as a general matter, liability is would probably not attach. Again, we don't own the property. It's not public property. And to the extent the airport is there, liability pursuant to your ownership there is attached when it was built. So we don't own this property. We have permanent immunity, so liability would be doubtful. We have permanent immunity, and we don't own the property, so liability would be doubtful.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Through the chair.
Yes.
I want to add something to this also because, when FAA goes on record and is in many different languages and also Caltrans Aeronautic, telling us this is ill-advised or in long term, it's not in the interest of safety and for congregation of people under the flight path. I was going to mention something. I understand the position of Prime Store as far as the commercial zone and other things. But one thing I have to bring to the attention of the City Council here is, yes, it is unfortunately, it is our business to worry about our grant assurances and liability with regard to grant assurances with the FAA. It is City Council's responsibility that not only look into the Subdivision Map Act, and interesting argument is going on between the two law firms here regarding applicability of the Subdivision Map Act. But unfortunately, the city is recipient of millions of dollars from FAA, of federal dollars, and they are holding us liable. In that letter that Mayor Pro Tem Valentine referred to, last paragraph, there is a paragraph that it makes a lot of sense for me personally and engineers who work with FAA and airport projects. It doesn't make sense or doesn't have any specific meaning maybe for a lot of people, but if you look at the last paragraph, in conclusion, the approval of structures within the RPZ will create a conflict with the airport design standards. For us, for our line of works, airport design standards, for us is law. So I know for attorneys, law is very important and they know which law books they are referring to. For us, for engineers, airport design standards are board of laws. And putting a structure in the RPZ will put us in violation of the airport layout plan. And therefore, I don't know, it puts us in a very conflicting position with FAA. Last week, Council approved a grant. Just last week in the special meeting, you approved the grant for continuation of our noise study. Every year we are receiving grants from FAA. As long as this airport is there and we are recipient of these grants, we are liable. They hold us liable, and I have here a document that is the grant assurances. This document was provided to the council each time when we bring a grant for approval. For taking, why are we approving the grants? Why City Council has to approve a grant that FAA approved already? What you approved is this. You are approving that we are going to be responsible for these grant assurances. That's the only reason I bring them to the council. So in these grant assurances, when you go to item 21 of these grant assurances is compatible land use. Our planning department is responsible for compatible land use at RPZ. Unfortunately, we failed. And I didn't realize that. It is a commercial zone, and we failed in that part. However, item 34 of these grant assurances, it directly refers to this letter from FAA. It says it will carry out the project in accordance with policies, standards, and specifications approved by the Secretary, including but not limited to the advisory circulars. This is the federal DOT, and aviation being part of it. So this is what I have to bring to your attention. I know from Prime Minister's standpoint, this is not an issue, but it is an issue before the City Council because City Council is also responsible for the airport and FAA and all federal grants. So in that regard, City is very liable. And I don't know in what position we will be when a structure is being built.
You have 2 minutes, sir. Come on.
Hi, this is Arturo Snyder again. Just to be clear, because I think this is just getting very confusing. The aviation easement is an easement in an area and a height. It establishes heights of buildings in that area. I don't think you need to overcomplicate this, as we're staying within the compliance of the easement, period. It's not more complicated than that. There's a diagonal line that comes from the beginning point of the aviation easement to the end of the aviation easement. And so long as you're in compliance with that, you're in compliance with the building. That's why they issue a letter that says, you can go ahead, you can build here. According to us, they don't give you permits, they don't give you the authority because that's not their jurisdiction. They bring that to the city. But this whole issue that somehow this trapezoid does not allow development is true only insofar as the heights of the buildings. And that's why as you move closer to the airport, a building becomes infeasible because it's not high enough. So I don't know why this continues to be a distraction of an issue simply because the only issue here is, do we need a subdivision or do we not? If we want to come in and pull a permit to build a building for our own use, just so we're clear, we can do that tomorrow. We don't even need to come back to you for that. It's just it's a great distraction, but it's really not what the issue here.
Through the chair, this is not true. I disagree. We are not talking about aviation easement. Aviation easement was not granted by FAA. It was issued by City Planning Department, and that's what I'm talking about, that this was a mistake. But what FAA is referring to, it's not like they are not aware of aviation easement or anything like that, but they have absolutely no regards in as far as what they are concerned with the RPZ. They are strictly telling us that the structures shouldn't be built in the RPZ. And we are all aware of it. All I am saying is that I am not disputing your position with regards to the Subdivision Map Act or planning issues. I am strictly just bringing to the attention of the City Council that we are responsible as far as FAA is concerned because we are recipient of federal dollars, and they are telling us that this may put us in a situation that may endanger our future receiving of federal grants, or put a freeze on it, or even worse. That's all I'm talking about.
I see no other bodies. I declare all communications closed. Oh, okay. You want, if you want. Yes, sir.
I will try to be brief. David Worley, HHR LLC, the private part of the public-private partnership that we have with the city at the airport. I think the big concern for the airport is that we have a building there that puts people in danger in the center line of the runway. If the City Council approves this appeal tonight, it allows future developers to build, as the attorney showed, numerous buildings in the flight path of the airport. A navigation easement is fantastic if an airplane has power and has the ability to navigate. We're talking about a situation where there's a safety issue where the airplane cannot navigate, and the heights of the building in line of the runway are in serious jeopardy. Now, I don't know if the attorney from Prime Store was referring to the development up north that happened to the Sacramento airport, but it was the story is almost identical, where the city approved against the Crossroads Shopping Center was proposed for construction on commercially zoned property at the northwest corner of the airport. The California Aeronautics Commission, in addition to the airport manager, objected to the constructions on the basis that it would be hazardous to patrons, as well as aircraft on approach to the runway. In addition, the Air Transport Association objected in that it might reduce the effective runway length. If we build buildings closer to the runway, it's going to decrease the effective runway length. The article goes on to say that the FAA determined that construction would not be a hazard to navigation, which is the same determination that they have made in this situation. Well, fast forward, what happens? An airplane goes right into the restaurant that was built off of the end of the runway. It happened to be a Farrell's restaurant. 12 children and 10 adults were killed. 28 persons were injured in the devastation. Now, what did that create? The impetus to a comprehensive land use plan for the area around an airport. Now, this crash, to Ms. English's question, Councilwoman English's question, resulted in a $5 million settlement for the survivors and the families of those who died. We have our partner and your partner, the FAA, suggesting that we do not build in runway protection zone. We have the California Caltrans Aeronautic Division suggesting that we do not, strongly suggesting that we do not build in the runway protection zone. We have the biggest employer in the city of Hawthorne, SpaceX. This is a letter from the COO of SpaceX, Gwen Chattel, saying that the decision to move to Hawthorne was in part to access the Jack Northrop Field and Hawthorne Municipal Airport. Many of our business partners, visitors, and my staff use the airport regularly. This proposal could result in the impacts to the runway length and would certainly put congregations of people in the flight path. I believe putting Hawthorne citizens and possibly my SpaceX team at risk in a restaurant built in the RPZ should be prohibited. And I sincerely request that you vote against this threat to Hawthorne and potentially our employees. So you have the FAA, Caltrans, your biggest employer, your city staff, suggesting that this go to further review. I would appreciate, from our position as your partner on the private side of our airport agreement, to vote no on this appeal and let it go through further review. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, I'll keep it brief. My name is Robin McCall. I'm a pilot. I'm a business owner here locally. I came to Southern California in 1992 with Delta Airlines. I spent a 26-year career with Delta Airlines. The 92, when I came out, I discovered Hawthorne Airport, great little airport we have here, and I've seen it go through a lot of changes over the years. Currently, well, I like it so much, it turns out I'm a partner in the flight school on the airport, and I'm the director of training for the advanced air charter company that's on the airfield. I'm a co-owner in the flight school, which is Beach Cities Aviation Academy on the airport, and I'm the director of training for Advanced Air Charters, which is the charter company. So as you might guess, we operate off of this airport fairly often. On a daily basis, we have charter flights going in and out, and we have flight training flights going in and out. These airports that are built in these municipal areas are tight. There's not a lot of safety area around them. This runway protection zone, the geometry on the one we have here, is a relatively new concept. And it's designed, the runway protection zone, I think we should all understand that it's designed to protect the people on the ground, in that this is an area where we should not have a large congregation of people. Now, I was around for part of the development back in 2000 when all of this was considered. So I have been many times over to this Target store and many times into the parking lot. And in that area, you'll notice that even the light poles are short little light poles. Why is that? Well, you know, it's less of a hazard to aviation in that area. But also, that's open parking lot out there, so you don't have this huge congregation of people. Where you do have a congregation of people is down near the Target store that's in the corner. We mentioned it several times this evening, and the fact that the Target store is built in the runway protection zone. But I think we failed to remember that back during that development, that the Planning Commission required the Target store to move its entrance to outside of the protection zone to create a less risky problem for the people on the ground, less of a risk. So going back to the FAA and the runway protection zone, I would say that, yeah, it is true that the FAA has not denied us permission to build into that zone. They don't have the authority to do that. But they clearly, in the two letters that we looked at tonight, offered recommendations that, hey, I can't deny you this authority, but I can tell you it's really not recommended that you build structures in here that are going to cause congregations of people. So with that in mind, I would ask that you consider, in the interest of aviation safety and the people of Hawthorne, the people on the ground, that we take steps as are appropriate to move forward and not permit any further building in that safety area. That's what it is, a safety area. Thank you.
I declare oral communications closed, so ordered.
Okay. I move to uphold the building director's decision denying the grading and building permits. Direct staff to prepare a resolution upholding the building director's decision denying grading and building permits for development of a restaurant at 2750 West 120th Street, lot number 2 of tract number 5336-02.
I second. Please vote.
All right. Miss English? have
Wait,
you voted?
one second.
It's not
No.
appearing.
We want to
Okay.
hear it 1 second.
Okay.
My understanding is that the motion was to uphold the building official's decision and direct staff to bring back a resolution to that effect. So a yes vote would be an approval of the essentially building official's action. you would be denying the appeal. A yes vote denies the appeal. Can you reset buttons, please? Thank you, sir. Yes.
Okay. Okay, vote reflects mayor and city council members voting yes with council member English abstaining.
Item number 10.
Number
No,
10.
no, I'm so sorry. Item number 11, ordinance number 11, please.
Okay. You want to proceed without the city attorney?
Sure.
Okay. Ordinance number 2096, first reading, an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Hawthorne, California, amending section 2.04.040, powers and duties, and chapter 2.04, city manager of Title II, administration, civil service, and personnel of the Hawthorne Municipal Code regarding city manager responsibilities of notifying city council regarding budget and general fund cash balance, and amending section 2.06.140 order of business of chapter 2.06 city council of Title II, administration, civil service, and personnel, adding agenda item, budget update.
I'll introduce it.
Mr. City Manager, may we have your consent calendar, please?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I have items 12 through 15 for your approval.
To the chair,
Yes.
can I pull 12? I have some questions.
Yes, I want to pull 12 as well. Go ahead. Well, let's vote on the rest. I move on the rest.
Second?
Please vote.
Vote reflects mayor and city council voting yes.
Go ahead, item number 12. I have the same concern as you, though. Go ahead.
City manager, I would like to inquire on the contractual service agreement with Plan Net Consulting. Why Plan Net Consulting?
I know a staff in IT, they were working on this for a few months, and if you don't mind, I defer to Chief, please.
Good evening, ma'am.
Chief?
Let me clarify the question. Why them specifically, or what's the purpose behind it?
Well, why them? What's the purpose? And, my other question is going to be, what's the cost here?
The purpose behind it is our ITS staff basically looked at the proposed project and what it could bring to the city, and then the dynamics that go with the project as such. And that type of management, oversight, engineering, and actually contractual checkpoints that you have to hit under a project cannot be done internally. So in order to do this project correctly, we should do an RFP. And this consulting firm, Planet, is the actual local consultant group that our ITS staff has already worked with. They were a resource that we reached out to. They've done this already for municipalities in other areas, and they would be our first point of contact to build this out in the right way.
There's a projected 82,510 plus expenses. Is this just for their services, rendering their services to draft an RFP? And what else is that including?
That's a proxy cost to essentially the build-out of what needs to be done in an RFP development, as well as as best you can, the ballpark estimate of overseeing a project as such, knowing full well that we actually don't have a project in hand yet.
Considering the budget restraints that we're under, where would this money come from?
The general fund.
What is the timeline of the consulting services? What are they, how long are we going to be?
We haven't established any of the hard points to it. They would actually be our partner in establishing what timelines, for instance, you as the council would like to see and what your global aspiration is, and then we would partner with them to build it out appropriately and then solicit the actual vendors who could bring that capability to the city.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question for you. If there are potential competitors or what have you that would like to bid on this particular item or this project, is there any way to get their IT or their consultants or what have you to work with our city so we don't have to spend $82,000? I understand $82,000 is over an extensive period of time. I get that.
I would tell you theoretically, yes, I'm sure that could be a capability. But I would tell you what we would want is a firm to sit really more as an objective expert. We wouldn't want to reach out to somebody and then believe they're experts, because you may find that they're going to leverage things to their advantage and we might find out too late. So really, as in any RFP, we try to be objective and neutral, decide what we want, what you, the council, wants to see as the end goal, but then also set it up with safeguards so that what you thought you were going to get is delivered, and then we also don't actually suffer a demise to city services or costs that nobody thought would be part of the deal to begin with. So that's why we would want a third-party standalone to work as the intermediary.
To the chair again.
Yes.
So it makes mention to integrating free Wi-Fi service into the city. Free. That's you know, again, where's this proposed free Wi-Fi? Where is this going to be? Where is this going to in our city?
I believe the concept is select business areas along the Hawthorne Boulevard corridor, which have the capability of maybe overlapping some civic infrastructure. But I will caution you, this was not an ITS-driven concept. So actually the questions that you would like to answer on that, really, the answers come from the dais, not from our end.
Okay, fair enough. So I guess it would be an expert IT person. I know there's a lot of folks that utilize Starbucks, for instance, across the street, just for their Wi-Fi services. And I believe most of them in our city have Wi-Fi, free Wi-Fi capabilities. But that's within their own business that they implement that.
The Starbucks I'm familiar with, yes. I'm not familiar with anything beyond that, ma'am.
So I guess if we're ultimately looking to inquire consulting services, we would then outline all the remainder questions and concerns we might have?
Yes, we'd actually, if this is approved, the RFP is approved for tonight, then what we would do is initiate a relationship with our consultant to be our partner in this endeavor. And then the first questions would actually be of actually the staff and the dais as to, okay, what is the free Wi-Fi project? What do you want to see accomplished, and what costs are you willing to accept or not? And then we would work with them to draft the RFP, put it out to bid. Vendors that are interested and capable will submit, and then the best so chosen vendor would be selected.
The concern I have is with regards to where the money's coming from, the general fund. That's my biggest concern. City manager, is this something that we could wait on? This isn't something that's pressing that we need to do today, is it?
This is, Councilman English, this is council's decision. We were directed to put this item on the agenda, and IT was able to accomplish, and this is before you tonight for decision. Obviously, it is going to be for 15-16 budget, so it's council's decision if they want to include it, that it can be incorporated into the budget for 15-16.
Thank you, Chief. Can I make a recommendation at this point?
Yeah, can I say something?
Just go ahead.
Okay. The bulk of this particular project, Arnie made happen in our redevelopment of Hawthorne Boulevard. He was able to get roughly $900,000.
Less than that.
You don't want to talk about
close to $500,000.
Okay,
Yeah.
$500,000 in conduit, actual piping to implement this particular project. So when you go out to a consulting firm, and a consulting firm says, or you go out to put it out for bid, the biggest cost is the installation of the pipes, the boxes, or what have you. That's the largest cost, which usually a carrier like a T-Mobile or Time Warner or AT&T or what have you, Verizon, that's their largest cost to implement, to put in free Wi-Fi services for a city, which will go down Hawthorne Boulevard between, I guess, between El Segundo and Rosecrans, or we're extending down to Imperial right now. Arnie?
Yes, actually to police department building. From Rosecrans to police department
Okay,
building.
so you won't have to be inside Starbucks anymore. You drive down Hawthorne Boulevard and you actually will have Wi-Fi. So it's up to the consulting firm. I don't necessarily agree with $82,000 in my personal opinion. That's a little high considering that they're pretty much setting up a parameter, a timeline, and an RFP for a bunch of individuals that want to come install this because they don't have to pay for the infrastructure of it anymore. We already took care of that. We took care of that portion. What I don't agree with is the $82,000 personally. I'm kind of with the council on the cost of it. Is that cost adjustable? Because, if it didn't go out for bid, we'll have 4 or 5 carriers ready to come slap in Wi-Fi, but we might not have the best service in essence. And I think what we need the consulting firm is to indicate or help us set up a timeline and also work with the bid process of providing the best free Wi-Fi down the boulevard if they're going to be using our infrastructure. But the biggest cost was eliminated when we redid the boulevard here. You have any comments?
Okay, so through the chair?
Yes.
We have these ISPs, these internet service providers. We're saying that first we got this consulting cost, $83,000. Let's say it's reduced by 10 or 20. It's still an impact on our general fund. But I know we're saying, okay, this is going to be free Wi-Fi. That there's people out there, groups out there like, I don't know, Time Warner or AT&T, who want to come and install this for free. What's free? So there's these groups these ISPs that want to set this up out of the goodness of their heart, and if anybody allows them, and they have the infrastructure, they'll just go put it up for free. They'll pay their own staff. They'll get this installed. They'll buy the hardware. I mean, out of the goodness of the heart. What's free? I mean, later on, what? They're going to start charging the commercial businesses like subscription services? Is that the case? So how is it free then? If they might be starting charging later on, what's free about it?
Advertising.
It's just to me. It sounds good if it was totally free, but I just think there's just some future charges, and it's just like we're doing all the hard work for these people to come and just make money off of us through us. Mr. Chief, can you kind of respond to my concerns?
Well, I'll make two quick comments. First, I think to the mayor, not that it was a question, but I will say, their projected estimate, I'm sure, is amenable. Again, we have nothing in hand other than a concept. So I'm sure it can be adjusted based on actual parameters of what the final project is. But you got to remember, whether the company that comes in digs trenches or not, that's a cost savings just to them. That's not a cost savings to us or to our consultant group, because they're going to have to manage the project regardless. What you're saying, free Wi-Fi, I have only honestly understood it from a global perspective. I assume the concept is to allow customers and patrons along the boulevard to access free Wi-Fi. I never have heard that it's a free installation. That's what this RFP build out is all to determine. What are the costs to the city? Will we save money because there's trenches and it'll be next to nothing? Or will it actually come across a variety of factors nobody thought of and will impact us unduly? So really, there are barriers to make sure that in a year from now, hypothetically, you're happy with the project and not regretting it because somebody sold you a bill of goods and didn't deliver.
Right, so to answer the council member's question, what happens is when you have Wi-Fi, it's like having a billboard in your phone. Everyone that logs on, you'll be able to see advertisings, they'll be able to promote their product. Let's say we went with AT&T. They'll be able to promote their product or what have you along the timeline while you're on the web. It's just a big billboard for the 100,000 people that drive down Hawthorne Boulevard or eat and dine or future shop on Hawthorne Boulevard. So I kind of agree with the council on I understand you said they can adjust the cost of the amount. Maybe what we want is a little bit a broader scope of what the service is, a little bit more in detail what they could provide for the 80. Go ahead.
To be honest with you, I'm going to anticipate their question, which will be, well, what's the project scope?
Well, project. Well, I don't know if they know that Arnie was able to include the infrastructure to provide this. So that's a huge piece. Now, talking to service providers, that's the first question. Is the infrastructure in? And not too many cities can say, yes, it was already included. Because a lot of companies will say, okay, we have to cut into the ground, we have to cut down the Hawthorne Boulevard, we have to shut down the streets, create detours. So what I think what we should do is, because of the cost, maybe we should table the item and move it out a couple weeks to get a couple more questions answered. But in terms of infrastructure, Arnie, is there a way we can get a map to Chief so to give the consultant to show what has actually been done? And also we can put that together.
Yes.
Yes.
Through the chair,
Yes.
that was going to be my recommendation. My concern was the restraints that we're under today with the budget. And, what's the rush here, in a sense? I know we've been talking about it for maybe, I don't know,
A year.
close to a year. And that was, through the infrastructure of the new boulevard and ultimately of the new ordinances that would allow for outside dining and whatnot. But I don't think right now is the right time. It's about timing and it's about the budget for me.
Do you move to table, Councilwoman?
Yeah, I want to suggest that we table it, we send this back. Let's get some more council
Feedback,
input
right.
and feedback, and possibly bring this back at a later date.
Our second.
Please vote.
What are we voting to table?
Yes,
To
table it.
Vote reflects mayor and city council voting yes.
Okay, we are on item. Mr. City Attorney, may we have your consent calendar, please?
Yes, I have item number 16.
Sure, you want to read it?
Item number 16 is a subrogation claim of State Farm Insurance alleging a dangerous condition of public property which occurred on March 23, 2015 at 141st Street and Hawthorne Boulevard. The recommended motion is to deny the claim.
I move.
A question real quick, I'm sorry, I should have asked a question to the city attorney. if we have State Farm or we are a State Farm, should I be leaving the room?
No, you're fine.
I'm fine?
You're fine.
Okay.
I move. Please vote.
Vote reflects mayor and city council
At this
members
time,
voting
I'll
yes.
recess the city council meeting, call back to order the parking authority. All members present. Mr. Secretary, your agenda, please.
First item will be the approval of the minutes of the regular parking authority meeting held July 28th, 2015.
I move.
Second.
Please vote.
Vote reflects chairman and authority members voting yes.
Is there anything further? If not, I will adjourn the parking authority and call to order the housing authority with all members present. Mr. Secretary, your agenda, please.
The first item will be the approval of the minutes of the regular housing authority meeting held July 28th, 2015.
I move.
Second.
Please vote.
Vote reflects chairman and authority members voting yes.
At this time, I recess the housing authority and call back to order city council member meeting with all members present. Discussion action item, Valentine.
At this time, I'm going to ask to table this because I do not have the documents to support this, although this is my recommendation. I wanted to give you the verbiage, and I don't have it, so I'm going to ask to table it for the time.
I can provide a little bit of
Can
information
you?
to you on this. This is an item that is recommended by the League of California Cities. By way of history, as you're all aware, a lot of cities in California who were also redevelopment agencies loaned a lot of money to their redevelopment agency. And before the dissolution of the redevelopment agencies a few years ago, what had happened was many cities either immediately began entering into reimbursement agreements between the city and the redevelopment agency. As in our case, we actually did have such a reimbursement agreement probably back from the 1970s. And we have been placing that loan on our recognized obligation payment schedule. And what this new legislation does, AB 113, it eliminates or refuses to recognize these repayments. And basically, it's taken away money that we believe is owed us. And we are objecting to AB 113. And we're asking the City Council to authorize the mayor to sign a letter saying that we are opposed to AB 113. It has a carve-out in there which basically accepts two cities, Watsonville and Glendale, which isn't fair. They should treat us all alike.
To the chair.
Yes.
I remember that during the redevelopment dissolution, we had fought Sacramento to assure that we had reimbursements of sorts brought back to us. And it was something that the finance department and the city manager were working hard to do, and I believe we were able to recoup some of those monies owed to us. Are you saying that AB 113 would ultimately not provide for cities to continue digging, perhaps looking into dollars that should be returned to the city?
On the recognized obligation payment schedule, we are getting a payment for certain debts that we incurred while we were a redevelopment agency. However, we still are not receiving any payments regarding our loans between the agency and the city. And all the cities are waiting for an answer on whether or not Sacramento is going to stand as a barrier to that objective.
Well, I support, I don't oppose to,
Do you still want to table it, or do you want to?
No, I think we can go ahead with that
We'll vote.
explanation. I'll go ahead and move to oppose AB 113.
I second. Please vote.
Vote reflects